Montana Association of Counties. This initially started as a way to connect with counties around the state to discuss the COVID-19 CARES Act and how that could be the money, how to access those funds for that, the CARES Act. And now, as that is winding down, we're going to start morphing into other topics and issues that you're facing. And so, particularly as we lead up to the legislative session, I think it'll be good to have some conversations. Not wanting to steal any of Eric's or Jason's thunder, but I think there's a lot that can be discussed. So we'll continue having these twice monthly town hall meetings to discuss relevant issues. With that, I think we're going to go ahead and get started on our conversation. We've got 54 people now have joined us, and we're going to turn the time over to Eric, who's going to regale us with all sorts of information about COVID-19 funding, the CARES Act, and other topics. So with that, we'll turn it over to Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. You do have to put up with me today. I think Jason's on the phone. I thought I saw his name pop up somewhere along here, but he is hunting somewhere, I think, east of Webo. And we always have this great fight about what is Eastern Montana. I'm relatively certain that east of Webo is Eastern Montana, and so he's there among you folks. I want to thank everybody for participating today, and especially for the MSU Local Government Center. You know, these things might seem kind of haphazard and unprepared and come off as if we don't know what we're doing, and that's mostly because it's true. But without the MSU Local Government Center hosting these and getting everybody together, I don't think we would have had the same success in advocating for COVID-19 response costs through the CARES Act that we've been having as of late. And that will be the primary topic of conversation today, although I do have a couple other updates that I think are significant and timely as we kind of morph away from CARES Act funding entirely as the format and topic of conversation for these meetings. That being said, I hope you all did get the announcement that the Local Government Services Bureau has opened up the third round of COVID-19 CARES Act eligibility. So the application period is open. And Ashley, if you can you share your screen and pop that notice up real fast? I want to talk about a couple of really important dates. So as you can see in there, the opening lasts until November 20th. You'll have a limited opportunity, again, another pretty narrow window to get your claims in for COVID-19 response costs. And this period is the period that goes from March through the end of October. If you've not claimed anything yet, you have that whole window. If you've claimed eligible expenses in that time period, that window is open for you to claim any additional eligible expenses for the full duration of that time period in there. In our conversations with the state lately, I can't describe it as a change of tone, although there's been, I think, some additional consideration for legitimate COVID-19 response costs that likely would have been denied in the past. So I'm getting a sense of some greater flexibility. So if you have something that's sort of marginal that you were thinking about making a request for, send it to us. If it's a significant expense or out of left field, get it to Jason or I, and we'll still continue to submit those to the state folks for pre-authorization. If you can still make a nexus, any connection between COVID-19 and your proposal and your costs, and they're still considered to be reasonable, the state is looking favorably on a lot of those requests. We have done a ton of pre-authorizations for emergency medical supplies since our last town hall meeting. There are a bunch of EMS, fire district, and ambulance services that have come through their counties and made requests for additional equipment. And that equipment can be relatively expensive, and the state has continued to grant pre-authorization for those expenditures. So especially on the EMS line, if you want suggestions or I always provide copies of Liberty County's initial requests because they're the ones that sort of broke the seal on the EMS side of CARES Act funding. So if you have suggestions or you want suggestions on what might be eligible expenses, I'm happy to share Liberty County's request with anybody out there. So I want to talk about consistencies too. With the state, they have been pretty consistent with things that they've denied in the past. There have been a couple examples in this last round where a request for pre-authorization from a fire department for turnout gear was made, and they've said consistently, no, we're not going to fund turnout gear. They have been consistent in authorizing expenditures on the tech side, laptops, computers, cameras, and things like that under some sense of reasonableness. And I'll give you an example. The city of Billings requested iPads, and I think we talked about this in the last session, but it's still a good example because we still continue to struggle with these on our meetings weekly with the governor's budget office. City commissioners in Billings meet regularly, generally use those more than once a week. Their requests for iPads were granted. A conservation district yesterday asked for 7 members of their district board to be able to purchase laptops and work from home. That was denied, and that was denied under a general understanding of the reasonableness and the frequency of use of equipment like that. What the state determines in cases like that is that there are probably different and cheaper alternatives than buying expensive equipment to be given for what looks like a limited use. You can disagree, I can disagree. That's not likely to change in the future. They're going to be pretty consistent in their determination about what the utility of the equipment purchased is like and what the frequency of use of that equipment is like. So I'm pretty certain that's going to remain consistent throughout the rest of this CARES Act process. And if you have questions about anything like that, again, please let Jason and I know, and we can either give you general guidance or send those through the process for pre-authorizations. I'll take questions on CARES Act at the end, but I do want to morph into some other topics that I think are pretty relevant as we move forward. And the first one I want to talk about is LR 130. That was the legislative referendum that on the surface was discussed and sold as a form of consistency for concealed weapon permit regulations that might have been adopted by local governments going forward. In theory, you don't want to be traveling from jurisdiction to jurisdiction across the state and not know what the rules are in terms of concealed carry. In practice, what it likely did is limited local government's ability to prohibit the carrying of concealed weapons in public buildings by people with valid concealed weapons permits. So, in situations where you might have some sort of security and screening system set up in your courthouses or during certain trials, or your sheriff's department tries to prohibit somebody with a valid concealed weapons permit from entering into their building, or in the visitation room of a jail, it is clear based on the language of how LR 130 changes the statutes in Title VII that you will not be allowed to prohibit people with valid concealed weapons permits from entering into your public buildings. It is less clear how as you still have a responsibility to make sure that unpermitted weapons shouldn't be in your public buildings, how you can do that. So in terms of screening, if you already have a screening system set up at metal detectors and whatnot, and you're patting people down in certain events or court cases or in your courtroom, it's our opinion that that can continue. So you could sort out the people that have weapons and have valid concealed weapons permits with the people that have weapons and don't have valid concealed weapons permits. If you don't have screening and you have some general prohibition against carrying firearms in your public buildings, LR 130 only addressed the language in Title VII. In the crime section in Title 45, prohibited places for carrying concealed weapons still contain the language that says A, this is in 45.8.328, sub A, prohibited places still include portions of a building used for state or local government offices and related areas of the building that have been restricted. There's a bit of a conflict there because LR 130 very clearly says local governments can't infringe on the ability for permitted concealed weapons holders to carry in public places and schools. That was the other component of that. But the crimes provision in Title 45 still say that local government offices are prohibited places. We're trying to sort that out. I don't know if I think Mackenzie's on the line, but we're not in a position to render an opinion about if there is conflict between those two statutes, or if the LR 130 language in 7 just means that penalty provision in Title 45 only applies to unpermitted carry folks. The point is this: LR 130 passed, the voters weighed in on this, and they took away local government's ability to prohibit the carrying of weapons by concealed weapons permit holders in public buildings and schools. And I'll take questions on that too as we get to one more topic of conversation, and then I'll turn it over to the membership for the question and answer period. And that is the passage of decriminalization of marijuana. Before we get off LR 130, that the effectiveness of LR 130 is January 1st. So anything that you are doing or thinking about doing, or modifications that need to be made for signage or resolutions that you've passed to prohibit carrying weapons in certain buildings need to be thought of and amended by the 1st of January if you want anything to change. And as always, I encourage all of you to consult with your county attorneys about what authorities you do or don't have. MACo will issue a general guidance and white paper, but ultimately it's your county attorneys that you have to follow their legal advice on. Decriminalization of marijuana. That will have an impact on your policy and procedure manuals. That will have an impact on your commercial driver's licensees, on your road and bridge equipment operators, how it impacts Department of Transportation, or commercial driver's license eligibility. It all has an impact. What that impact is still a little bit unclear. So for right now, Mackenzie has drafted a white paper, and that will get out to the membership to give you some general guidance, both in terms of drug testing policies and amendments to your standard policy and procedures manual, which for the most part, if you've adopted MACo's version of those in the past, addresses illegal drugs and alcohol as prohibited things and as prohibited actions as it relates to the workplace. So you have in the past said you can't come to work and bring illegal drugs or use alcohol in the workplace or in work time. You're going to have to amend that now, because if marijuana under state law is not an illegal drug, one could argue that it then would be legal to use while you're at work, and you might not want that. So we have some suggested language, some policy suggested edits for you guys to be looking at your policy and procedures manual. The prohibition on smoking, you might want to clarify with signage or adopted resolutions if you designated legitimate smoking or non-smoking areas of your campuses. Marijuana needs to be considered in part of all of those as you refresh and update, given that the state has decriminalized it for all intents and purposes. With those three topics, and hopefully Mackenzie ready to answer all of your questions on two of those three topics, I'm ready. Fire away.
Eric, this is Jason. Before they all jump in, couple of things just to clarify. If you have pre-approvals, there's two different ways that you can request those. One is through Eric and I. The other way is direct through D of A. But if you go direct through D of A, don't do it with your actual reimbursement request. We had one that submitted that way, and their pre-approval request sat for a significant amount of time because it was part of a request. So if you want pre-approval, send it through Eric or I, or send it as a standalone email to D of A and ask, just so that it doesn't get set on the sidelines and not responded to immediately. And then also on this next set of submittals, the state is asking us to really dig in and come up with good cost estimates for what your final request might be. So when you figure out your final number for your January submittal, try and do your best to guess what that number will be. I think they're going to hold a set aside based on those numbers. So it's really important to us that we get as close as we can without going under. So we're Price is Right this time.
So Jason, thanks for that, because in my notes here that I'm supposed to be referring to in bold and in all capital, I was supposed to make that request that you do a good job in estimating total costs as it comes through. And then one more thing I'm going to add, and then we'll take question and answers. The pre-authorizations, you surely don't have to go through Jason or I. You can send those directly to the state folks. What Jason and I often do is rewrite your pre-authorizations to use certain language that we know has been successful in the past. And so we still encourage you to send those to us. There is an example of a request that I didn't edit as well as I could have that got a little bit balled up in our discussions with the state. So, and I always ask permission for whoever submitted for the ability to rewrite, to make a better justification between the COVID-19 nexus and the requested purchase. So use us as a resource. Jason's better at it than I am, but we both do a good job of reworking your pre-authorizations to make sure that they're consistent with what has been funded in the past. And with that, we'll take questions.
All right, I'm looking at the chat box. There's a couple here that are related to the CARES Act funding. The first one's from Keith Wilson. Gallatin County will be sending 2 pre-approval requests on behalf of special districts. Big Sky Fire District, power load gurneys for reduced contact while loading patients into ambulance. And Hebgen Basin Fire District, oxygen saturation monitors for the ambulances. And then the next thought on here is, with expanded computer storage space, we will be needing to update our backup servers to accommodate all the additional information. Most of this is caused by electronic records and remote access to this information. Will this be likely to be approved?
I'd like to see the write-up, and if you can get a good justification in Nexus, I'll sure take a swing at that one. And in the first part of it, the Big Sky Fire portion of it, we met yesterday, and all those requests were authorized with the exception of the install cost, and I did let the fire chief know yesterday late afternoon. I have not seen the Hebgen one, so if that was coming under a different email or different cover letter or from a different source, make sure you get that to Jason or I, and we'll shepherd that one through and make sure the language is consistent with Big Sky. And for those of you out there, I think the Big Sky request alone was somewhere north of $300,000 in equipment. So it was a big bite, and it was a successful pre-authorization application.
Sounds like Jason's audio might have cut out a little bit for some people. So Eric, do you want to repeat that estimate request that you guys have?
So what the state has done this whole time, and let's go back to the very early days, they reserved $300 million for local governments to be able to make claims for reimbursement. As we get to the latter stages of this process, there's still a dollar amount that's held in reserve that they need to estimate that you'll claim. So when you do this last round, they're asking you to say, give a really good estimate of what might be outstanding through the end of December 30th, not the 31st, but through December 30th, that you'll lay claim to in that last round of reimbursement. If we miss the mark and they've reserved too much, the money will go back to the feds. If they haven't reserved enough, then they'll likely start doing some denials on things that they've authorized in the past. So your estimates this time are really, really important. And there's always been a line for you to kind of carry forward a projection of what those estimated costs are. And we're asking you really to put pencil to paper this time and do as good of a job estimating as you can.
Great, thank you. Can MACo provide any model policies and procedures for recreational marijuana, for example, for the road department?
Mackenzie.
Okay, I'll turn on my camera so you can see me talk. So typically people in a road department are going to have CDL, right? So those are your CDL holders. And CDL regulations, the testing, that's all federal regulations. So what Montana did, passing the making marijuana legal, it does not affect your CDL holder. If they receive a positive test for marijuana, it's going to come back as positive, and the medical review officer will still say they failed that test. It does not affect them. They still cannot use it recreationally, and it will jeopardize their CDL if they do. So no, we won't be providing any policies for that because it doesn't change. As far as non-CDL holders, if you want to be doing drug testing for non-CDL holders, we have always, and we will continue to recommend that you use a consultant to develop any policy and testing procedure, because the Montana laws on that are pretty complex.
Great, thank you, Mackenzie. Let's see. So the next question that we have on here is, do you know if there will be another reimbursement from LGS for the recent election mail ballot costs?
Likely not. If you can find something that wasn't contemplated in the previous distributions of election-related funding, something out of the ordinary, you hired like additional staff or bought additional equipment or had some extraordinary cleaning costs, things like that, get them to us and we'll see. But it doesn't look like there's going to be any kind of formulary distribution of money for elections.
Looks like Jason Strauff has a question. Jason, do you want to unmute?
Mackenzie, on that recreational marijuana, and you addressed the CDL, has it been discussed, would that also apply to the transit federal funding that goes to the state MDT to administer down to local communities for public transportation? They don't require CDL licensing, but they do require random drug testing.
I'm not super familiar with that, but if you're going to do any testing of employees, it has to be, and that's outside of the CDL arena, it has to be under a set policy. So you'd have to have that policy in place before testing them. And even with marijuana, even though it's legal, your policy can still say that they can't use it recreationally, and that if they test for it, you can hold them accountable. The law clearly says that even and it spelled it out that employers can still have drug testing policies and hold employees accountable for violations of that. Did that help?
I think so. The nexus I was trying to draw is, since this is actually federal money that the state is administering, the requirements are tied to the feds with the money.
But it's not going to be under the CDL drug testing statutes or regulations, so it would still be state statute on testing.
Okay.
There's a follow-up on here about, sorry, we're kind of jumping back and forth, about the election mail costs. So it looks like there is a line on the new form for election mail costs. Eric, do you want to touch on that a little bit?
I can, and I'll have Jason help me out here. If that, again, I think this goes to the extraordinary additional costs. I thought that there was already a distribution of the return postage given to each county, but that might be the line that they're allowing you to file claim for. Jason, do you know?
So the advice I've been giving is, if you have costs that were not covered by the actual distribution of funds from either Secretary of State or others that are COVID related and exceed those dollars that you received, submit for the difference and put the nexus in there, and that those costs, that the additional costs were covered elsewhere. Early on, the LGS program said they would pay for election costs, but they would not allow double dipping. So I think we have a strong argument to cover anything in excess of what's been paid by others.
All right, I think that catches us up on the chat box for now, and no more hands are up at this time. So
let me focus on one thing that's really important, and we say this, and I write it back in all the pre-authorizations, and I want to make sure that nobody's glossing over this. You're eligible to receive reimbursement through the Local Government Services Reimbursement Program for those costs incurred up to December 30th, not December 31st. And you have to have shown an invoice, proof of payment, services rendered, equipment delivered and operational by December 30th. No exceptions, no waivers, no nothing. If something happens in the distribution chain and you don't get your equipment and it's not in place by December 30th, you will not get reimbursed. There are no waivers, no exceptions, no grants of any additional consideration. So all that EMS stuff that's out there, the power lifts, all the devices that these entities have ordered, they all have to be on site and operational. All of the county attorney's requests for software that have come through all needs to be installed and operational by December 30th. Anything you purchase, goods or services, has to be received, invoiced, paid for, and in place by the 30th, or you're not going to get reimbursed. So that last round of reimbursement is going to require the certification from the county saying you're going to essentially swear that what you're asking for money back for has been put in place by the 30th of December, not the 31st, and not any time thereafter. That's really important as we get in these latter stages. What that means to me is that if you guys have great ideas about ordering equipment or buying supplies, your time is running out. Paid for, invoiced, proof of payment, and in service and operational by the 30th of December. It's really important to remember that.
Looks like we have a couple more comments about the mailing cost for elections. So Angela said she did include the cost that was not covered by the LGS payment on her second submission, and it was paid. So it's back to that making them whole without double dipping, right?
Good.
And then we have another comment here. So I'm feeling a bit stupid here. But there's so much going on with all this COVID stuff. It's hard to keep track. What election costs are covered under the CARES Act requests?
In general, extraordinary unbudgeted for COVID-19 response election costs. Between the Secretary of State's office and the grant funding they received, and Chantel can come in and jump in on this conversation, and the decision that the state allowed for return postage and the mail costs to be reimbursable or paid for upfront, all the additional costs that were COVID-19 are applicable for CARES Act. Partitions that you had to put up, extra cleaning supplies. Things that aren't reimbursable are your normal budgeted costs, like your cost for election judges and the general operations of the election. So if you can show that you had to do something different, spend extra money, change processes, advertising was a good example. I think some counties have been reimbursed for advertising costs when they sent out notice that they changed the format of the election to be all mail, or didn't. So if they didn't, but they still sent out additional and did legal notices or advertising to their constituents that the election was going to be conducted in X, Y, or Z ways, those costs are reimbursable. Chantel, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, you can. The Secretary of State's office also has a reimbursement program through some money that they received through the CARES Act for election costs. There is a match with that program, so I recommend going through the local government program first and then hitting up the Secretary of State program afterwards. You can submit for reimbursement for those election costs, so I don't know. There will be a deadline on that too, because CARES Act funds need to be used before the next year starts. So that's it.
And what about the cost of census mailings and postcards? Should those be on this request?
They should, absolutely, and we received pre-authorization for those from the governor's budget office. So anything that you did census related that was an extraordinary cost, notifications, advertisement, and especially those postcards, claim that reimbursement.
Assuming you incurred and paid the expense by October 31st. Otherwise, whatever spilled into November, put on your final.
So, Jason, that brings up a good point. This latest round, this is only for things up through October 31st. Is that right?
Yes, from March through October 31st. So, again, if you forgot anything or you thought of other additional costs, you're allowed to make claim from any period of time starting March through October, end of October.
So as hard as the deadline at the end of December on the 30th is from that side, it's the opposite going the other way. It's full flexibility. If you've discovered a cost that was incurred that you didn't ask for in a previous request, that doesn't mean you lost the opportunity to do that. Include it in your next one.
Okay. I have another question here. So what is the standard for quote unquote in use for software? We can have the attorney software installed and putting in new cases, but have tens of thousands of files to migrate before fully implemented, and that will take months. Does that count?
Yes, I want to be really careful about this. We have really pushed the envelope with this one, and I think we've come to a pretty neutral position with the Local Government Services Bureau folks. Operational. Doesn't mean that you're using it, doesn't mean that it's fully usable. It means that it can be used. So the system has to be able to be used. And with Carpel in particular, we were advised that they're going to get the systems up and running, but they're going to do some training after the first of the year. So they're going to encourage folks not to use it, but it's going to be operational. And that's the fine line that we've gotten with the governor's budget office. The software has to be installed, invoiced, proof of payment, and operational. Doesn't mean you have to be using it full effect.
But no invoice dates past December 30.
So invoice date, and it has to be paid by December 30. Is that right?
Yes.
All right. We're back to caught up, besides a couple of questions about Jason's elk that he may or may not have gotten at this point.
I saw those coming through. There was also something else, folks. I'm going to have Chantel talk about district meetings, but there was something else on the pre-authorization side that stoked my memory. I'll try and think of it as Chantel starts to talk about our dates for elected official training.
Okay, so this year we're doing our elected official training regionalized. So it's regionalized elected official training. So as opposed to bringing you all to Helena, we are going out to your communities to see you. And we have 4 meetings scheduled. December 1st will be in Glasgow, December 2nd, Forsyth, December 8th, Dillon, and December 10th, Shoto. Be sure to get this information to your newly electeds. Everyone is invited. We need to make sure that they get that information as well. We're sending them letters, but just in case we get information that isn't up to date, just be sure to reach out to them and let them know.
And Chantel, when can they expect that material is going to be, or when they're going to see that, those invite materials?
Out. It was either the beginning of this week or end of last week. Everything runs together these days, but I did send something out already. We'll continue to keep sending reminders until right up till we go out on the road. The information is posted on the MACo website. You can get to it either from the home page. It'll be on that big slider on the home page, the big image slider, or you can go to the events section and it's posted there. You can get the draft agenda and you can register. Registration is $50 and that includes lunch.
So that is exactly what reminded me of the pre-authorization. And for the record, Jason owes me money on this. A portion of your costs for elected official training is CARES Act eligible for reimbursement. We will talk extensively about COVID-19 and responses, and a big part of our curriculum is going to be about the pandemic and what responses have looked like across the state. So the state has agreed that a portion of your cost, your county's cost for elected officials training, will be reimbursable.
Okay. Let's jump back into the chat. There's some new things that have come in. Eric or Jason, do you guys know how much of the CARES Act funding has been distributed so far?
I looked at the projections last week. I didn't open up the one this week, but it seemed to me we were on pace for somewhere around 220 million.
Okay. Then we have a question here about credit card fees, and it looks like this happened in a couple of places. So it says, we were paid on the first CARES reimbursement for credit card fees on treasurer's office transactions while we were closed to the public. On the second CARES reimbursement, the state took the money back, saying that we have to, quote unquote, prove those credit card fees. Here's the issue. The county never pays credit card fees. The taxpayer pays those fees as a convenience for them for using a credit card. We bore those costs when we were closed. Does anyone else have this issue? And it looks like Gallatin County had the same thing happen.
So is the issue that you can't show proof of payment because those transaction fees just came through on each individual transaction by the person that was on the end?
Clarice, are you on a mic? Yep. Okay, if you want to go ahead and unmute and want to give us some more context, that'd be great.
So the only transaction fees we have are when we were closed. What else do we have to prove? We have $0 on credit card fees for, the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. So I'm just not sure how to prove to them that it was when we were closed. I just don't know what to do. I think it's weird that they paid it and then they took them back.
Send it to me and we'll have that as part of our discussion. That's a clearly COVID-19 response cost and it should be clearly eligible. And so I'll ask them for reconsideration if you give me some details.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead, Jason.
The struggle we've had with them on the credit card fees, frankly, has been trying to nail down what they will accept as that documentation. They haven't said they won't pay it, but they have yet. Butte Silverboat's having a struggle trying to quantify in a manner that they'll accept as well. It sounds like yours is a little more straightforward because you don't charge them to begin with. But be happy to help you try and lock down what they want for documentation to prove that out.
Okay, thanks. And they don't allow us to have cameras on our computers, so it's so much fun seeing all of you, and I'm just a blob.
All right, we have another comment in here. It says, so for us, it means this goes back to the date by which everything needs to be submitted and incurred and paid. For us, it means the invoice date needs to be by December 15th to get paid by December 30. So I guess the caution there is if you have a process that takes more than a couple of days to get figured out, maybe plan ahead to get those invoices in. Is that fair?
It is fair, and I also think practically there's going to have to be some consideration at the state for payments extending past the 30th. They won't do it now, and I don't want to get your hopes up, but I think in reality that what CARES Act cares about and subsequent audits are going to look at is that the services were provided and that the invoice was in time. Nobody, especially not the state, but there's nobody that pays the day that you get the invoice. It's just not the way that it works. So keep in mind that the 30th is going to be the hard deadline until we push them to make an exception in the latter stages of the last reimbursement period. And I think something reasonable like payment 60 days if the invoice is before the 30th is something that we could advocate for. Don't hold me to that. The deadline is the 30th, but I think reality will set in as we get closer.
Yeah, we're pushing them hard to have some wiggle room on the actual payment date. There is no wiggle room on the invoice date or the services rendered date. They're not going to move off of that. We think we have a puncher's chance on the other, but please don't hold us to that until we get confirmation.
So if we need to have proof of payment for our credit card purchases, the check cut to the credit card company, how will these items purchased with a P card be reimbursed?
I need more detail.
Give a sec. See if they have a mic. Nope.
Ashley?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, I wrote that. So this is Jamie with Gallatin County. So when things are purchased with a credit card, when we send documentation to say, okay, here was the credit card purchase, what we have been required to do is then send the check that we cut to the credit card company for all of those purchases made with credit cards as proof of payment. But if we're making purchases up to December 30th and they're being purchased with a credit card, we're not going to cut a check to the credit card company and have that proof of payment to the credit card company for some time into January, maybe the end of January. I mean, so I'm not quite sure, do I tell people don't use your credit card to buy these items? I don't know. What is your thought about that?
You are making my point exactly for me. And so I think that's where I'm going to be able to get in that room and tell the state that the deadline for the 30th has to be an invoice deadline and not a payment made deadline. Nobody makes, especially with credit card purchases, nobody makes payments at the same time, can show proof of payment at the same time that they place their order. And then I think it also goes back to what we've been struggling with the state since March when we first started talking about this program. We've told them this. It is offensive to say to a local government that you need anything more than the invoice because you're implying that the local government's not paying their bills. And we've said, quit this proof of payment crap. It's ridiculous. It's an extra step, and we don't think you need to do it. And we've not been successful in that argument. I think that being said, when we get closer towards the end of December, we will absolutely use those examples of reasons why they have to allow for a 60-day proof of payment period for costs incurred up to the 30th of December.
We have a couple of questions about payroll in December. So one is for December payroll that actually gets paid in January, will that get reimbursed? We'll go with that one first.
So think about that.
Related.
There's going to be an opening reimbursement claim period for all the costs incurred up to December 30th. That will be in January. You'll be able to sort through, run your reports, do your submittal in January for all of those legitimate costs up to the 30th of December. But you do have to cut off your payroll date on the 30th, not whatever the end of your payroll run is. So keep that in mind as you're running those final payroll reports. The 30th is the 30th, and it doesn't matter what your pay period ending date is.
Yeah. So if your pay period extends beyond December 30th into January, you're only going to get reimbursed through the December 30th date.
What about if it's December 31st?
You'll only get
Not the
paid
31st.
If you have a payday deadline that is the 31st, do you do a prorated amount for all but that one day?
Yes.
Okay. And that's for presumptively eligible employees, is that right?
Or any of them that are substantially dedicated. Any of your payroll costs are only applicable to the 30th of December, not the 31st.
Back to the credit card bill thing. Lake County the state's accepted the credit card statement as proof of the date of charge for them. And the same is true, it looks like, for another group. We just included a copy of our credit card bill. It is automatically paid out of our bank account, and it shows that on the bill. But we may run into the problem of it not being paid out of our account until January. So it sounds like some other folks are kind of wrestling with that.
I have an email from the state that says that they will give consideration. I can't publish it, and they've not acknowledged it, but they recognize that there's an issue with the 30th minute deadline. And so I'm relatively confident payment processing and reconciliation will be able to happen after the 30th of December for all those examples. That being said, don't run out and make a whole bunch of purchases on the 30th. Just try to avoid that if you can, and then we will fight like heck to get proof of payment extended a reasonable amount, i.e. 60 days after the deadline.
All right, I think that gets us caught up again. If anybody has any last questions, now would be a great time to drop them in there. We have about 15 minutes left in our scheduled time. I don't see any hands up. While we wait for that, Eric, do you have any thoughts about the next time we're going to do a meeting? We're getting into kind of holiday season and schedules are going to get a little bit wonky, I think.
I still think that we need to have my preference if we can get people to attend is that we have one in that roughly 2-week out period for those that can attend. Because I want to do continual reminders about what the deadline looks like and see if there's any more flexibility on behalf of the state. I expect a bunch more EMS type proposals to come through. And so I want to make sure that we can talk as a group about anything else that's out of the ordinary that might be coming up. I have a feeling that we'll get a better sense of if there is additional flexibility in the next couple of weeks, and we'll be able to inform you sort of in real time. So I'd like to plan one for a couple of weeks out.
Okay. So Chantal and I will work on that. The day after Thanksgiving? Everybody's going to attend that one?
No.
No. How about the next week?
Yeah, probably.
Okay. So we'll get that out. So watch for that. Question about getting contact information. Eric, Jason, do you guys want to give your preferred in here so we have it captured in the recording?
I'm writing it right now.
I just did yours, Eric, and mine.
Oh.
We're on it. So we can't see the chat in the recording. So we have
JRITTAL@mtcounties.org is my email. EBYBRYSON@mtcounties.org is Eric's email. Jason's phone number is 406-698-3255. Eric's is, I don't know.
406-461-2084.
Great. Thanks, guys.
So, folks, and back to the district meetings, I'm really looking forward to getting out there and doing them on the road. For those of you that have attended in the past, it's usually 3 or 4 days in Helena. They used to be in the basement of our our building 1 in the conference room. We had moved them last year and the year before to the hotel, but it was still a 3-day curriculum that we're going to try and pack into 1 full day. I encourage all of you to attend. Seasoned elected officials, new elected officials, more than just commissioners. The training it's pretty good. Actually, the local government center portion of it is really good, and the McKenzie portion of it is really good. And it's really good generalized training for elected officials. If you participate as a seasoned elected official, you have a lot to share, and the newly electeds learn from you from just being in the room. So I encourage everybody to come. But know that we're taking 3 days of curriculum and putting it into 1 day. We will miss some things. And so with this format, what we've talked about is the budgeting 101 portion of it. We do it in a town hall style continuation of elected official training at a date after elected official training. That's the big chunk that we'll miss as we go out and do these in 1 day increments. And so keep that in mind. We're not skipping over it. We're not forgetting about budget 101 and budget management as part of that curriculum. We'll probably just have to deliver it in these town hall meetings after elected official training.
Much easier to remember all those budget things when you can pause the recording.
Right.
Well, and we don't want D of A to be thinking they have to come out with us for 2 weeks of travel when we want them working CARES Act requests and getting money in your hands.
Jason, we have a comment. I want to thank you for taking time out of your hunting trip and your supposed to be rest and relaxation time to join us. So thanks for that. And I think, again, thanks to all of the MACo group, especially Eric and Jason, for your advocacy. We see that here. Sounds like everybody really appreciates all the time and effort you're putting in for the community. So thank you for that. I'm also going to throw out for the newly elected officials, if you have folks who are new or just people who don't feel super comfortable with parliamentary procedure, we now have an online course on the MSU localgov.org site that is free. It's about a 2-hour course that's all self-paced. So if you have anybody interested in that, go check it out on our site. Dan, Eric, Jason, anything else?
I just want to say thanks to everybody for participating. If you are waiting on some pre-auth and you haven't got a response back from us, give me a reminder. I tried to get everybody done and updated last night from all the discussions, and there was a ton of authorizations done yesterday in that meeting. So if you haven't heard from me and you're waiting for an answer, please poke me.
And I just put our website in the chat. So if you wanted to check out that parliamentary procedure program, it's one of the first things that'll pop up when you link onto our website. But other than that, I don't have anything else to add.
All right. Eric, you want to close us out?
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.
See you all in December.
Thank you.
Hello, I had my hand up.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
I'm not hanging up then.
Okay.
It's just Darren.
Yeah, just me. So we ran into a issue here in Webo County. It's not really CARES Act related, but it's COVID somewhat related. And I just wanted you all to be aware of it. There was a resident that passed away. And so whether it was COVID or not, they had some other issues going on. So what's going on here with the family? I got a pretty disturbing phone call with the family that about HIPAA. They are really upset that it might be spread through Billings Gazette, other type of, social media, whatever case may be, about, age, sex, gender, died from COVID. And so what I'm asking and trying to get a hold of this morning, I tried calling the governor's office, the AG office, the law library. I kind of been through all the gamut this morning, but I guess what I'm saying, I think if we need to readdress this, how these passings are being addressed to our media, because it's really insensitive. So I'd like a little help somehow to drill down on this. I mean, the family was fine with it being chalked up as a COVID death for record keeping, but they really wanted to be between them, because you know how it is in small town America. If a elderly man in his 60s or female in her 70s pass away in Rico or Dawson or White Sulphur Springs or whatever, we all know who that is. So I guess we need to figure out a way to keep that out of the media, because it's, until now, I didn't think of it either, but it is pretty insensitive to that family. So any help, direction, anybody I could contact, I'd sure appreciate a name, number, whatever I'd take.
I
keep it out of
will.
the media.
Let's follow up after this. I think there are a couple contacts in the governor's office that we should get you in touch with, but I think their reporting has been pretty uniform, and I don't know if they're going to deviate from it, but let's try. I understand exactly what you're saying. In small town Montana, if you start giving any details other than county of residence and a reported death, then people are going to know.
Yeah, I just think it's really insensitive because it's heart attacks or flus or whatever other deaths aren't drugged through the papers or anything either. So I think it's something that we need to address and keep that private.
Chantel, are you still on? I don't see her.
I think we lost her.
I'll get a hold of you right after this, and we'll get you some contact information. I'll help chase down the folks you need to talk to.
Okay, we appreciate that, guys and girls. All right.
Eric, there's a comment that came in too. Any thoughts on motor vehicle shutdown by the state starting November 20th for maybe up to 10 days? How are counties dealing with this?
I'd open that up to the group. Anybody else have this on their radar? I didn't know that they were shutting down for 10 days.
Yeah, our treasurer got notice of that, saying they're doing a computer upgrade system starting November 20th. So we cannot do any motor vehicle processing, new registrations, renewals, anything in motor vehicles. And it may be up to a 10-day period that we're shut down.
So there'll be a 10-day lag built up for when it reopens that you're not going to take a month to get through that.
Okay.
I'll try and see if I can find out anything more, but that's going to be a huge pain in the butt.
Yes, it is, because we're already having complaints about motor vehicles lines just with the way it is. So a 10-day shutdown is almost detrimental to the process.
Have they talked about any sort of notification to the public so that people know that that's shut down?
Lake County has put out our own notice on this, but I don't know what the state is doing.
All right. I'm writing that down too.
Thanks, Eric.
Okay.
A follow-up question that came in. Do the employees have any work to do? Are we supposed to give them paid leave?
Yeah, that's a great question. If they don't have anything else to do, I don't know that you have to give them paid leave. I don't. Let me think about that for a minute too. Maybe encourage them to use vacation. I'll have Mackenzie send something out once I get a better handle on the 10-day shutdown. You can't, but in general, you can't force them to not work. I mean, find something productive for them to do if you can.
All right. I think we're caught up again. Thank you guys for engaging and staying on here and asking your questions. These are important things to talk about. So thank you.
Darren, give me 10 minutes. I'll give you a call.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you in a couple weeks. Have some safe, happy holidays.
Thank you.
Good luck, Jason.
Thanks. Pretty well done.
There you go.